problems of Arabic language because there are many pesantrens and very strong Arabic. So generally, I don't think you have problems with Arabic language.
And the student will be halfway from Indonesian and another half from
so.
Yeah, foreign countries, foreign student. Likewise, the professor.
Who is at Depok, the campus.
Sorry, Prof. We are going to start in 2 minutes.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Okay.
How are you, Prof. Omar? Alhamdulillah.
So you are fine, okay? Alhamdulillah.
Yes, Alhamdulillah. I talked with Prof. Mehmet this morning about your presentation.
I see. Okay. I think we spoke last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe in the next couple of months, we will invite Prof. Mehmet and Prof. Habib Ahmed to be a guest speaker as well.
Yeah. I mean, you should also invite Prof. Tariqullah because now he's green finance now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
circular economy.
Yes.
They call it circular economy.
He's still with Qatar Foundation right now, Professor Tariqullah Khan?
No, he left. He joined IZU, the Istanbul Zaim University.
Oh, okay.
Because as you know, Turkey is now, especially under the current president, is very strong on Islamic economics, Islamic finance.
Oh, okay.
And they got a lot of support from the government. A couple of universities. So a couple like Istanbul Zaim University, Sakarya University, and a few other universities in Istanbul.
Munzirkaf also at the university.
Yeah, but not full time lah.
Oh, okay.
Prof. Makbid is full time there.
Prof. Makbid full time and part time Munzirkaf and Tariqullah Khan.
Tariq, yes. So he left Qatar and joined there.
How about the Prof. Tariq's son? I forgot the name. He's my classmate in Durham University.
No, I think he joined IZU, Istanbul Zaim University.
Okay.
But Ahmad Farouk Aisan, are you talking about Ahmad Farouk Aisan? No.
No.
Okay. Tariq Aisan, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Ahmad Farouk Aisan used to be the deputy governor of the Central Bank Turkey. He left Turkey and joined Qatar University. So switching.
Yes, he switched. Yeah, okay.
Because Qatar pays a lot.
Yeah, I know.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Professor Omar, I am Haider Bamualim. I am a university secretary. It's nice to meet you, Professor.
Nice to meet you.
I want to learn from you.
No, we are learning from each other. We should be doing more of, kind of collaboration and support. And I always believe in more policy work to help countries rather than pure academic work. And this is my passion to help, companies, countries to do that. I'm now currently working, also advising one government in Africa on which is interesting expansion of Islamic economics on Hajj.
Hajj fund. Okay.
On Hajj fund, yes.
All right.
Creating a financial institution. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Azmi, Excellency Rector, Pak Komarudin, I think it's time for us to start. Ibu Iman Sari, please proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Dadang. Distinguished speaker, Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Azmi Omar, Honorable Rector Professor Komarudin Hidayat, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Iman Sari Ujianti. On the route towards the opening of Triple IU September this year, we are delighted to present you a series of international webinars, which will indulge you with fascinating topics and introduce you with a few brilliant speakers of international repute. In the first Triple IU webinar on January, we already presented to you an interesting topic titled Islam, Authoritarianism, and Underdevelopment, where Professor Ahmed Tikuru joined us and acted as a guest speaker. The second Triple IU webinar on February, we invited Professor Abdullahi Ahmed Anaim as our guest speaker, who'll talk about liberating Sharia and decolonizing human rights. Recently, the third Triple IU webinar on March, we invited Professor Tim Lindsay to be as our guest speaker, who talk about Islamic law and society in Southeast Asia. Today, for this first international webinar series, we are thrilled to invite Professor Dr. Muhammad Azmi Omar to be our guest speaker, who will present about the current development and challenges of Islamic economics and finance. This topic will explore the ongoing issues and trends facing Islamic economics, business, banking, and finance. It will provide us with a fresh perspective on the ever-changing world of Islamic social finance. The current development and challenges of Islamic economics and finance is particularly raised to welcome and discuss some of the causes behind the shift in the global economic landscape. All blessed speakers and participants, Triple IU is a newly established legal entity, state international university, founded in 2016 with presidential regulation, and operates under the administration of the Ministry of Religious Affairs. So, for a brief information about the university, I would like to invite you to watch the Triple IU profile video. Please watch.
Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia adalah graduate school. Universitas Islam bertaraf internasional menjadi pusat pengkajian kebudayaan Islam yang modern, toleran, dan berkemajuan.
Secara fisik, kampus ini didesain sebagai kampus yang ikonik, yang futuristik, dan diharapkan inilah salah satu model kampus dengan arsitektur tropikal. Kita harapkan bahwa para mahasiswa Sivitas Akademika itu nantinya menikmati suasana kampus yang hijau, yang berbuah, kemudian mereka juga bisa olahraga pagi, sore, naik sepeda dari asrama ke fakultas, ke library, ke masjid. Kampus ini kita harapkan betul-betul sebagai satu center for the epistemic community, pusat dari masyarakat ilmiah. Mereka ke sini betul-betul fokus untuk studi. Di samping Indonesia sebagai laboratorium yang hidup, pengalaman kita berdemokrasi, pengalaman bagaimana mendirikan republik ini, dan ini bukan Islamic State, kita juga menjaga kebinekaan. Hal-hal seperti ini kan unik sekali. Nah, bagaimana ini bisa kita kemas dalam satu format akademik dan budaya, kemudian menjadi semacam konsumsi intelektual bagi masyarakat intelektual Indonesia dan juga bagi masyarakat luar yang datang ke sini. Karena sebuah universitas itu mesti ada yaitu program humaniora, ilmu sosial, sains, di samping juga studi keagamaan. Dengan adanya beberapa tenaga ahli dari dalam luar negeri, mereka itu tidak saja memberi kuliah bagi mahasiswa dalam kelas, tapi kita harapkan mereka juga bisa diambil manfaatnya dan memberi manfaat pada komunitas di luar kampus ini. Dengan demikian, kampus ini tidak saja dimiliki oleh masyarakat Indonesia, kita harapkan kampus ini dimiliki juga oleh dunia Islam. Keislaman yang berkembang dan yang kita kembangkan itu keislaman yang terkoneksi, terbuka, berdialog dengan ilmu-ilmu yang lain. Sekarang bagaimana kampus ini juga menyambung perkembangan sejarah yang agak terputus, satu bangunan ilmu yang sudah terpisahkan, yang sudah terdistorsi, yang termiskinkan. Kampus Islam itu tidak hanya Islamic Studies sesungguhnya, tapi juga mencakup berbagai ilmu-ilmu yang lain.
Dari Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia akan lahir intelektual yang memahami persoalan kehidupan global, menghadirkan solusi yang efektif dan bermanfaat untuk semesta. Rahmatan lil alamin.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the brief information about the new campus. And now, let us begin this webinar by inviting Professor Komarudin Hidayat to deliver his welcoming speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'du. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome all the participants today for webinar conducted by Faculty of Economic and Business, Indonesian International Islamic University or UIII. I welcome our eminent speaker, Prof. Dato Dr. Muhammad Azmi Umar, President and CEO of the INSEF, that is International Center for Indonesia for Education in Islamic Finance. I would like to thank Prof. Azmi to share his knowledge and vast experience with our community. Thank also goes to Pak Dadang, my colleague, the Vice Rector of UIII, for being a moderator for this discussion. This seminar will be a segment of the series with various topics portraying development, innovation, and challenges in Islamic commercial and social finance. It is completely conducted on a digital platform in line with the social distancing norm due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're proud to be part of national communities who continue to serve and positively contribute in the dynamic progress of the global Islamic finance development. For this purpose, we wish to continue our cooperation with INSEF to conduct a mutual collaboration in many aspects of education and research in Islamic finance. In this opportunity, please allow me to introduce to all of participants a little bit of UIII. It is, as we watch already, a newly established graduate institution that offers various academic programs focusing on the study of Islam and the Muslim world. The university also has various research centers with specific expertise to respond to strategic issues and challenges related to Muslim society worldwide. Last but not least, I would like to thank to all academic members of UIII and all of participants for supporting this event. I wish everyone a successful and fruitful webinar. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor, for your speech. We can now continue the webinar session. I would like to invite Dadang Mulyawan, PhD, the Vice Rector for Planning and Finance, to chair this session.
Thank you very much, Excellency Bapak Rektor, Pak Komarudin Hidayat, colleagues, and also Pak Dato Azmi Omar. First of all, thanks for joining in this very interesting program, and of course, and learning from you. Let me share. I don't need to introduce you anymore because you are very famous, inshallah, Pak Azmi. Everyone knows. Let me jump to the expected of this important program. As the part of a webinar series, we would like to always facilitate intellectual dialogues. And at this time around, we are trying to include also the economic and finance Islamic in facing what is challenge in the globe. And then the expected outcome of this webinar is to understand how the society and also the government needs to respond to the current challenges. And particularly for Islamic economic and finance, how we need to develop it further. Do we need to develop it as the part of discipline, but at the same time, we need to also address and respond to what is, faced by the society. And then the third, this webinar aims to inform the public about how Islamic economic and finance could be appropriately and relevant to improve economic performance and promote sustainable development. Okay. In order to make this webinar program successful, there are, basic certain rules. First, of course, the moderator will invite into the speaker. Speaker will provide materials, and inshallah, Pak Azmi has already prepared excellent material for us to listen to and to learn much from him. And then moderator will maintain the flow of discussion and manage time. And during the webinar, please also note that all participants should mute their microphone. And then the participant will be allowed to ask questions and comments during the webinar by using chat box on Zoom. And then the moderator will read question and refer to the questioners. And then lastly, the moderator will provide a recap and closes the session. Without further ado, time is yours, Prof. Azmi.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my slides. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Very clear.
Very clear. Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi washabihi ajma'in. Bapak Rektor Profesor Komarudin Hidayat, Dr. Dadang is the moderator, vice rectors, senior officials, academic staff, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, first let me thank the university for inviting me to share my thoughts on these topics of the future of Islamic economics. An important topic indeed, where I think we share our thoughts and our views in this particular subject. Let me go on. Before I go on, although you know that, my background, but let me share with you also. Apart from being a faculty member, I'm also a Sharia advisor to 4 institutions in Malaysia. Bank Rakyat, of course, Indonesia is a Bank Rakyat, but this is the Malaysian Bank Rakyat. I'm a Sharia committee member of Bank Rakyat. Etika Takaful, also a member of the Takaful Sharia Committee. MUFG is a Japanese bank, more of investment banking, corporate banking. I'm also a Sharia committee member. I'm also a Sharia committee member at the Securities Commission Malaysia, which is the Capital Market Authority, which is in essence quite similar to BAPEPAM earlier on, but maybe now OJK. So I cover both banking, takaful, as well as capital market. And because of my background, I tend to do more policy and industry advice to not only in Malaysia, but also abroad. So what I intend to do is first to look at the idea of Islamic economics, and later on to look at some of the challenges that Islamic economics can provide in the context of solutions. And then each of those challenges I will discuss. And then finally, I will also pose questions to members in terms of how do we move from here. And I'm glad that some of the speakers you mentioned earlier on are people I also admire. For example, Dr. Abdullah Naim, people who are trying to make Islam more relevant in the context of a multiracial, multi-religious society. So I believe that we need to, to really make Islam as a solution. But to do that, we need to have a new set of interpretation. So we need to have people who are able, who are brave enough to come and say that we need to do those things. And I know, Indonesia has that long tradition of reforming, and Indonesia to me is the right place to do that. In Malaysia, it's quite difficult because we have some other factors which may not allow it to happen. So to say it diplomatically, so I see Indonesia has a great potential to make all these changes. Okay, because I've read writing from various scholars. Okay, so coming back to the area of Islamic economics, as you know, Islamic economics has a short history as opposed to other areas. You know conventional economics, although some of the Islamic economists claim, Adam Smith and so on. But if you look at the modern Islamic economics as an area, I'm not talking about as a social science, as an area of study, still new. If you look at most started with the idea that the country become independent. So how do you then organize the country through Islamic economic system? And then in 1976, of course, King Abdul Aziz University organized the first conference. And the objective was to develop Islamic economics as a social science, similar to conventional economics. But the question is whether it now has been developed as a social science. I think to me, the judgment is still out there. People are still, struggling, trying to identify and to come out as a social science. Or is it a science for Muslims only, or a science for humanity? That's also a question being debated until today. Because if we say that Islamic economics is Muslims based on religious precepts, then are we saying that it is only for Muslims and not for non-Muslims? But we know at the same time, Islam is for the humanity. So these are some of the grappling issues that Islamic economists are trying to, discuss and debate. So even if we look at the definition of what is an Islamic economics, scope of Islamic economics, its methodology, whether it is a positive science, a normative social science, are still being debated and being discussed. Okay. And of course, we know that the Islamic Development Bank has instituted an award for Islamic Economics Prize since the 1980s. I think about the last 2 years, they have changed it for Islamic economics. They changed it into projects of Islamic economics rather than naming individuals. Coincidentally, I was also a member of the selection committee for the IDB Prize for Islamic economics for this year. And I will not tell you who the winner is. It will be announced soon by IDB. Okay, so now if we take from those perspectives, we come back to the current economic issues and challenges. Of course, we know COVID-19 affected many countries. It started from health crisis, goes into economic crisis, education crisis, inequality crisis, environmental crisis, to name a few. And the dominant economic system, which is capitalism, is being questioned. Many economists, even conventional economists, put forward new ideas. You have donut economics. You have very recently the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, proposed stakeholder economics, and many other names trying to address the issue of the shortcomings of the current economic system, which is based on capitalism. So the argument is that because of capitalism, we see the focus mainly on short-term. Individuals play a very important role. Short-term interests of the company, not society. Environment is less important because everything is trying to focus on shareholder interests, interests of specific groups. So what we see is, in this particular case, huge poverty, increasing poverty, inequality, both income and wealth. Many people are excluded from the financial sector, damage to the environment, and there's a big digital divide between the have and the have-nots, between rural and urban areas, between the low income to the middle income to the higher income. And we know all the statistics, which I don't want to, to relate. So we know all these things. So we always, and as a Muslim economist, we always say that Islam has a solution. But the problem of when we say Islam has a solution, first we say that we have Islamic economics. Bear in mind, unlike conventional economics, where they can test their theories in real economies, in countries, there is no country that is implementing Islamic economics. So what we are talking is there are countries that are implementing bits and pieces, but not Islamic economic system as a whole. So we do not have that. So a lot of proposals that are being put forward are more theoretical because we cannot test, because the test of a theory, Islamic economic theory, the test of a theory is you put forward the theory and you test that theory. But because the theory does not relate to the real world, and then we have the problem of trying to test something which is normative. Economics is a positive science. But if we are saying that ours is normative science, then how can we prove or disprove a normative science? So this is the challenge. But what we do have in the context of Islamic economics is that we do have certain implementation of Islamic economic practices in a number of countries, including even Indonesia, which is very strong. Okay, so we have that bits and pieces of Islamic economics principles and practices, particularly in the issue of financial inclusion, in the issue of poverty, income inequality. So we have that, and also in terms of the environment and digital divide. So we do have. So what I'm going to discuss is, which all of you are quite familiar, but what I intend to do is to raise questions more than answers, and to provoke some of you later on, particularly on the issue of poverty alleviation and zakat as a tool. So as we know, when we talk about the current glaring issue is the issue of income inequality. The 1% own 90% of the world's wealth. The 1% owns 90% to 95% of the world's wealth. I mean, many statistics have shown that. So there is a big gap between the very rich and the very poor. So, of course, Islam says that, and scholars agree that zakat has the potential to reduce poverty, to reduce income and wealth inequality. And zakat, as we know, is an important religious obligation under Islam, and it is mentioned in the Quran and Hadith. For example, Allah says that Allah has favored some of you over others in provision, in Surah An-Nahl. Okay, and then so what essentially it says, this verses talks about, yes, there are inequality among human beings, but Allah dislikes inequality, so we need to address those inequality. Okay, so one of the ways is, of course, through zakat. And another ayat in the Quran talks about, and give the relative his right, and also the poor and the travelers, and do not spend wastefully. So again, talking about, optimal spending for the benefit of society, not to be wasteful. Which also comes to me, the argument later on, I think, which I mentioned earlier on. I think one of the areas that we need to also consider as part of the Islamic economics is on secular economics. Just imagine how much waste we spend during Ramadan, how much food we waste during Ramadan, you know, and we are talking about Islamic economics. So these are some of the arguments. So we say that in today's implementation, can zakat be the solution to alleviate poverty and reduce income and wealth inequality in Muslims or OIC countries? We know it's a very important tool in Islamic economics. It promotes social cohesion, it redistributes wealth, it alleviates poverty. I mean, these are the things that we know, and it supports economic growth and achievement of what we call it broader development goals, achieve Maqasid al-Sharia and SDGs and stable financial system. This is all good things that we say, you know, the potential role of zakat. And then worse is that because of COVID-19, if you look here, it was expected in the forecast pre-COVID that poverty will go down. But in fact, due to COVID, poverty has in fact increased rather than decreased. Okay, and this is across the board in many countries, even in Western countries. Poverty has increased due to COVID-19. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is to share with you some statistics, although it is dated 2018, but I just want to illustrate my points later on. If you look at the wealth distribution and income inequality in selected countries, I purposely divide them into five categories, or not category, but you know, 5 quadrants. You have Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Tunisia, one group, and then we have Egypt, Senegal, Mali, Bangladesh, Pakistan, then Central Asia countries, and then you have Iran, Turkey, and then you have Indonesia, Malaysia. So if you look at the income Gini index, you see that countries like Tajikistan, 44%. I mean, we can put up to 0 to 1 or 0 to 100. Okay, so we see that Tajikistan has a very high disparity in terms of income. Indonesia, Malaysia, we have, and we look at wealth also. Wealth is even worse. Okay, because income is only part of the picture. If you look at wealth, you have Algeria, Morocco 81%, Indonesia 83%, Malaysia 82%. So and Kazakhstan, for example, 92%. So it shows that many countries, the disparity in terms of wealth is even higher than income inequality. And the other columns refers to GDP per capita, median daily income based on US dollar purchasing power parity, as well as poverty rate. And poverty rate, again, will go up, as I said, due to COVID-19. So if we look at this in terms of, we say that zakat can reduce inequality, can help to alleviate poverty. Can it do so? Okay, so that's a question. Can it do so? We always talk about potential, but reality on the ground may be different. So this is the question that I'm posing. Let me just go to this. What I like, this is a study again done by United Nations, where they came up with what we call UN Social Protection Floor Initiative. Okay, and then I will relate to zakat in a short while. So basically, this initiative aims to ensure access to essential services and social transfers for the poor and vulnerable. It focuses on 2 critical components: supply of essential services, and then the financing access to essential health, and then the minimum income support. If you look at zakat, in essence, zakat also meets similar requirement because zakat talks about the 8 asnaf, and the fakir and miskin are part of this category, as you can see, the poor and the vulnerable. Okay, and zakat also, as we know, provides support for education, for healthcare, water, and you have implemented also in Indonesia, in the case of water, housing, food, and so on. It also provides income support to children, poor working family, elderly, and so on. So essentially, what the UN Social Protection Floor Initiative does is that it tries to estimate in each country how many % of your GDP is required to support the poor. Okay, how many % of your GDP based on the number of poor people in the country, poor and vulnerable, how many percent of your GDP will be required to support the poor and vulnerable? In essence, what I look at this is that it is also applicable to zakat, because we want to know how many percent of the poor and vulnerable in a country. So based on that percentage, can we then estimate how many percent that we need to support the poor? How much zakat can we raise in order to alleviate and provide support to the poor? Okay, so this is where I see we always talk about, zakat, but not in a comprehensive system. So to me, the model by UN, Social Protection Floor Initiative, is something that we can emulate and in fact copy to apply this in our zakat collection and distribution and management, of course. Okay, so if you look at this, you will see that the Social Protection Floor Initiative covers health, education, water, food, sanitation, housing, and minimum income. Okay, so these are the categories which I will not go into detail. But if you look at the breakdown based on this social protection floor, you will see that in the case of Indonesia, I take as an example, based on the requirements, Indonesia would require, but again, this is 2018 data, 2.05% of GDP to support the poor and vulnerable. Okay, 2.05% of GDP to support the poor and vulnerable. And those are the backgrounds that you can see, the breakdown in terms of child benefit, poverty line to all orphans, person above 65, and so on. Okay, so if we look at zakat, just to contrast, zakat can also provide all these things. So what I'm saying is that using social protection floor can help us to estimate the zakat and to distribute according to this category, because it does not contradict the Sharia principles of zakat distribution. Again, then my next step is to look at what is the potential for Indonesia. Okay, and this is I took from Dr. Irfan study, and as you can see from here, this is based on 2016 GDP. There are at least 4 interpretations that we can see from here in terms of zakat computation, which means how do we calculate zakat? There are a number of ways depending on the interpretation. So from the what we call 2 classical approach, 3 and 4, the classical definition or interpretation, where you can only collect 0.5% of GDP, that's the highest if we use classical fiqh approach to estimate zakat. If we use contemporary fiqh approach, 0.6, slightly higher. If we use, again, contemporary fiqh approach under optimistic scenario. Optimistic scenario means that the components of zakat that are interpreted broadly, including salary, assets of companies, and so on. Okay, I mean, you can look at his paper in terms of the definition. I will not go into this. So as we can see from here, definitely the amount required to support the poor through the social protection floor is 2.05%. However, the zakat that can be raised under optimistic condition in Indonesia is only 1.75%, based on the definition of 2.5% maximum zakat that is allowable. So what I'm saying is that if we implement zakat fully, for example, in Indonesia, at most we can collect is only 1.75% of the GDP, which is not enough to cover the 2.05% required under the social protection floor. So how do we then remedy this situation or solve this situation? One possible way is, again, to revisit the zakat rules and rate 2.5%, which means that increase zakat based on the current requirement of a country. So that requires ijtihad, which requires people who are progressive, who thinks that the rules of 2.5% is only applicable during certain time, certain period, certain place. Now things are different. Societies have changed. Therefore, we need to revisit the rate of zakat and make another ijtihad in order to address the current issues faced by a country or community or society. There are, of course, people who argue that we need to introduce additional tax rather than increase the rate, because rate 2.5% is already fixed. It cannot have ijtihad. We need to have additional tax. But the counter argument, including myself, is that why do we need to introduce additional tax since the Quran only mentions zakat? Okay, Quran only mentions zakat, not other things. But of course, in countries where you have different religion, different ethnic groups and so on, that may be possible. But again, to me, if a country wants to implement zakat fully, to implement Islamic economics, then I think one of the things we need to do is to revisit again the rate of 2.5%. Just to share with you, another economist, French economist, even argue that there is a need to impose wealth tax, not only income tax, but also wealth tax in the range of 0.1% to as high as 90%, depending on the wealth of individuals. This is some of the ideas, okay? So that's one issue when I look at zakat. So what I'm saying is that whilst we always say that zakat can help to elevate poverty, but if we are not willing to revisit, restudy, then zakat will continue to be a smaller component of Islamic economics, and it will not be a powerful tool for a country. Okay, zakat must also be integrated with the social safety net of a country, which means that in many countries, we have this Ministry of Social Welfare. Why is zakat not part of the social welfare, where zakat and other supporting systems of the country can be used as a powerful tool to elevate poverty and to reduce inequality? Currently, in many countries, zakat is seen to be left to the NGOs. It's more like, supporting rather than becoming the main instruments to address the poverty issue. So that's my comment on this. Okay. Again, because of the time, I will try to keep within the time. Second issue is about the financial inclusion. We know the importance of financial inclusion. Many Muslims are left out in the financial sector because of the belief that one is religious belief, the other one is most of the Muslim countries are agriculture based and they are rural based, so they do not have access to financial services. And we say that yes, in order to address this financial inclusion, we also talk about zakat, wakaf, infaq, and so on, sadaqah. And why do we have this financial exclusion? Why people do not participate? Again, based on the FinDex study, one reason is insufficient funds. People simply do not have money to have a financial account. They do not have trust in financial institutions. To open an account is also costly. And to go to a bank is also costly. Physical access or distance, lack of necessary documentation in the rural areas, sometimes even they do not have identification cards. And of course, religious reasons. So these are some of the potential reasons for financial inclusion. And we say that yes, Islamic finance, especially Islamic social finance, can address this in the context of particularly insufficient funds. Zakat, wakaf can be a trustworthy organization. It can minimize costs. It can also provide through digital means, so there is no physical access. They can address virtually. And Muslims want Islamic financial services. Okay, and this is what we have. We have zakat, sadaqah, wakaf, infaq, and so on for financial inclusion. But And then these are some of the examples that we have. We have cash wakaf deposits at financial institutions. We have takaful products with wakaf component, micro takaful. We have in Turkey for refugees, bank and bank card for financial assistance, financing app for university students in Indonesia, e-wallet. So some of these are examples that we have for Islamic finance solution to increase financial inclusions. We have crowdfunding platforms and the likes of Kita Wakaf, Etis, even in Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, My Wakaf, Global Sadaqah. So these are some of the examples. But then, and then of course, we have the applications of blockchains. As an example, the Smart Sukuk Mutarabah by Blossom Finance in Indonesia. I think that was in 2019. And then Fintera crowdfunding platform. But then my question is, and these are the examples, I will not go into detail, but my question is again, do we have, coming back to this issue on using what we call it, on using Islamic social finance instrument for financial inclusion, do we have the impact reports to show that yes, when we implement zakat collection distribution, when we implement sadaqah, infaq, as well as wakaf, we collect and we distribute, do we have impact report in terms of what this organization does? How many % of those collected money are used for administrative services? And how many % actually goes to the beneficiaries, the poor, the vulnerable, and so on? So do we have that report, the accountability report, or another set of people call it impact report? Do we have that or not? So again, we talk about the potential Islamic financial instruments, but many of those Islamic finance organizations, particularly the one that is implementing zakat, wakaf at the NGO level, do not provide annual report, do not provide impact report. So much so that, again, there is lack of trust on those institutions. Okay, my next point is on sustainable, responsible investment, the halal and tayyiba investment. We talk about negative screening. Because Islamic finance, Islamic economics talks about negative screening, which means that we exclude interest-based gambling, all things that are not Sharia compliant, so to speak. But the perception is that we are still focusing very much on, similar to capitalism, which is profit-oriented, profit maximization. We are less concerned about the positive thing, the positive screening. We are not concerned about on the employees, on the labor, on the impact of Islamic financing, Islamic economics practices towards environment, towards employee. So we are not that concerned. However, of late, we do have now a merger between what we call Islamic investments as well as social responsible investments. So now we see that we have investment, Islamic finance, and ESG, environment, social, and governance. So we have that now. But again, as you can see from here, and this is an example, this is another example of the classification. And this is example in Malaysia. As we can see, although we talk about Islamic economics, being concerned about environment, people, and so on, but unfortunately, we are not a leader. We tend to follow the West. So when they introduce sustainable, responsible investment, we say, we have in Islam. But we are not the one leading it. We are just following them, and we modify to suit the Sharia. So therefore, we include the negative as well as the positive screening. So that's an example. The final one that I want to talk about, this is, just now we talked about investment, now we talk about financing, the intermediation. And we always claim that Islamic finance, or rather Islamic finance, is based on religion and that religion of Islam, and then Islamic finance is beyond profit. We say that. However, the criticism towards Islamic finance continues to be, raised, not only in Indonesia, Malaysia, and in many other countries, because people see that there's not much different. So one of the ways that especially the regulators are trying to do is to incorporate Maqasid Syariah inside the Islamic banking and finance. So what it is argued is that Islamic banks should incorporate Maqasid Syariah in their decision making. In their credit assessment, they should include Maqasid Syariah. And as we know, Maqasid Syariah is based on the 5 protections. And we are talking about the promotion of benefits and avoidance of harm. So based on those 5 principles, Islamic banks should incorporate Maqasid Syariah in the context of financing decision, looking at credit risks, and so on. So that makes it unique as opposed to a conventional bank. I remember, especially since last year in Malaysia, when the government, the central bank introduced this called moratorium, then the discussion among the Sharia committees at the bank, when moratorium or postponement of
Mas Abbas,
principal and profit.
Enggak, saya perlu ada wifi ya.
Principal and profit, the Sharia decided that there is no compounding of profit that is not paid for a certain period. Whereas in the case of conventional, if somebody delays the payment, then not only the principal, but also the interest is compounded. Whereas in the case of Islamic banks in Malaysia, the profit portion is not compounded. So the profit portion remains the same. There is no change, although people are allowed not to pay for 6 months. So trying to show that yes, Islamic banks implements Maqasid Syariah. Islamic banks are ihsan-based rather than purely profit motive. And these are some examples that we can see as being practiced in Malaysia. So at the end of the day, when we look at Maqasid Syariah, we should be concerned about the impact towards the people, the community. We should be focusing on the planet, on the environment, so that it is a sustainable finance, while at the same time, financial institutions should also consider profit in the long run. So these are some of the issues the ideas put forward in order to ensure that Islamic finance and Islamic economics has solutions towards the economic problems. But the key thing is that in order to implement such solutions in the Islamic economics, we have to ensure that we review the existing law regulations. Zakat law as an example, we have to review it to ensure that it becomes relevant and it is current in order to address poverty alleviation and inequality. Islamic social finance instrument, which as we know, implemented also in many countries, including Indonesia, to microfinance, the banking and takaful services. Of course, we have that, but however, the question is that we must ensure that we have to put proper regulations in place in order to ensure that it really fulfills its objective in addressing all those issues. And to address the issues, criticisms towards Islamic finance, particularly the investment and financing side, then those institutions should implement Maqasid Syariah as a basis for their decision making. I think that is, in a nutshell, my idea. So it's just before 3:30. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you, Prof. Azmi, for a very straightforward and insightful presentation. I have taken some notes. The focus of your presentation. First, of course, we agree that Islamic economic has been implemented in terms of peace and puzzles in national economic policy agenda. And then the question is how we need to move forward, introduce not only to the society, but also to the government when it comes to the implementation. Of course, the question by the government is how significant and how beneficial when we try to implement the Islamic economics in a real life. And then, of course, not only Islamic or Muslim countries, everyone is facing economic challenges in terms of inclusivity as well as the externalities like what we are now facing, COVID, and then global imbalances that has not been resolved very successfully, and how Islamic economic and finance can address and provide alternative solutions. And then you have also give an example of the implementation of zakat program, zakat and Islamic social finance in general, and how the implementation and the real activities is still far from the ideal, meaning that we have not been able to utilize all the potential because the number is still far from what has been expected. And then about the financial inclusion, you have been very correctly mentioned. Financial inclusion requires the three elements. First is the institutional arrangement that can improve the bargaining position of small peoples, and then technical skill, and lastly the economic capital, meaning it has to provide the rational cost of fund. When they want to develop, of course, they need to be implicitly subsidized by low cost of fund. And then from the digital, it opens up the opportunity for Islamic as well as the mainstream to develop further. But for the Islamic finance, how they can or we can use that opportunity very effectively. And lastly, you are also mentioned about the similarities of the Islamic economic and finance to sustainable and responsible investment. But at the same time, the challenge is for us not to only follow, but how to take a lead by taking some ideas from Islamic perspective that can give more color. Before I open up the question, as the moderator, I have a prerogative right to give you some questions. First, Pak Azmi, when we talk about the technology, well, how the Islamic economic and finance in particular can utilize that digital technology development to make a kind of frog leap, meaning, like, for example, I give you an example in terms of murabaha contract. In murabaha contract, sometimes common people just put murabaha contract similar to that base, but in fact it's not. But when we would like to make this more progressive by using technology, when you transact economically, by using technology, we can identify what items is included in the transaction. It is not about the deferred payment activities, but also the halalness and how you can combine this in to give more values, not only to the Muslims, but also the non-Muslim that shares the same vision. Like you have correctly said about the sustainable, responsible, but when we want to include not, for example, the green economy, and then put it as a part of Islamic finance, then we can, put more values that look, Islamic finance has already done more than what is expected by the people. Secondly, when we talk about implementation, not to make Islamic economic and finance just a piece and parcel in the national economic policy, to your opinion, what should be the vehicle when we would like to implement? If you can still remember, Pak Azmi, when we're together at UIII, we did an NAFSAP review on how we can put Islamic economic and finance in the center of the policy potentially. And then taking from there, how as the government, not only government, but supposedly advisor to the government would like to advise for them to utilize this concept, but not stop at the concept level, but how to implement this thoroughly and comprehensively and systematically and harmoniously with the current regulatory setting. I think there are two questions just to stimulate the others.
Yeah, a lot of questions. Thank you very much. Let me go to the first question on technology first. Coincidentally, last Tuesday, I was at the annual meeting of CIBAFI in the part of the panel discussion on the report that was launched by CIBAFI, and they call it the Global Islamic Banker Survey. And this report talks about Islamic banking, because CIBAFI is a banking industry, Islamic banking industry. So they talk about 10 years ahead. What does, or how Islamic banking will be 10 years ahead. You know, so we have in our panel from technology side, people from the technology, people from the banking industry, people from the I would say from the standard side. So we have a good mixture. And to me, I see the potential of technology as a leveling effect for Islamic economics and finance. Why do I say that? Is that, no, we need to understand that Islamic banks have limitations in terms of implementing the Islamic economics principles. We know that banks is a financial intermediary because of the risk management of banks. Banks are not able to take more risk than what it can take or what it can absorb. However, we talk about, you know, we want to reduce financialization in a country because financialization creates a bubble economy, creates debts and so on. So how do we then address this thing? I think one of the solutions that are also discussed in the last Tuesday's meeting is about using technology, using AI, using data analytics. So I give you a very simple example. You know, we talk about implementing real murabaha. Banks may not be able to do that because of the limitation as being mentioned earlier on regulatory standards and so on. But having technology through P2P will enable you to really implement real murabaha. For example, you could have a sales transaction under P2P platform. Or you can even have mudarabah musyarakah or equity investment through equity crowdfunding platform. So you see, technology has really bring about opportunities for Islamic finance to grow and expand. I'll give another example. If you look at the model of takaful, takaful is still run on a business model. However, in Middle East countries, they run on mutual model. Okay, but in China, although they are not religious in that sense, this group of people, they have created I don't call it a takaful, but they call it a mutual insurance platform, where members of that platform have to pay for the cost of the misfortune or medical expenses incurred by a member in that group. You know, so this is based on takaful, based on ta'awun, helping and supporting each other when they face calamities. So there are many models, not Islamic at all, but they follow, I would say, similar to the Sharia principles of supporting each other. And for us, those are the things that can be emulated and implemented at different OIC member countries. You know, so again, I see the future of technology will in fact assist and support the development of Islamic economics and finance. So that's one. Because we talk about artificial intelligence, using artificial intelligence will enable us to get more, you know, risk assessments and so on. Therefore, we can then promote more of risk-sharing principles and contracts. On the second question about implementing Islamic economics and finance as a national economic agenda and policy, it's very difficult to implement, but again, there are things that can be implemented. I remember, for example, when I was in UIII also, we supported the government of Senegal in implementing their Wakaf. First is on developing the Wakaf models, guidelines and regulation, and secondly, helping them to develop the Wakaf plan so that they can roll out. Similarly, we supported the government of Maldives in terms of the Hajj management as well as the Zakat management. So the idea here is we need to get those into the policies of the government. Okay, do not be very ambitious to put everything, but if you can start with smaller components, for example, the fact that if you are able to create, for example, as I mentioned, Wakaf as the whole country's Wakaf. It's not just individuals or small group of people, but Zakat being a national, what they call it, tool to address poverty. Zakat is the main tool. And for example, in Indonesia, where you have more than 80% Muslim or close to 90% Muslim population, so you can use Zakat as a powerful tool to address poverty. So putting that as part of the national policy of the government, and that to me should be done on a programmatic approach, on specific, rather than be very ambitious to do everything. Identify areas and then work with the authorities. Like what you see also for the financial sector, you have the IFSAP, the Financial Sector Assessment Program. So work with the regulators. My experience is that, for example, if we do not bring regulators into the picture, financial institutions will not want to implement those things. To implement even VBI, value-based intervention in Malaysia, is not easy until and unless the central bank comes in and say, look, we want you to implement. Then you see the differences occurring by the financial institution. And reports are being made. Therefore, they have to report to the regulator. So in this way, I think regulators have to play a role. Universities like Indonesia International Islamic University must play a role to bring about more awareness, more knowledge, not only to the public, but also to the regulators to understand that, yes, we are not, converting the country into Sharia or people will have that Islamophobia, but we want to implement solutions that will help to address, the issue of poverty, the issue of financial inclusion, and so on. Thank you very much.
Okay. Pasmi, while waiting for the others to complete their questions, further to your comments, I have two comments. First, you're saying that non-Islamic financial institutions shows the convergence towards Islamic inspired institution. And then when it comes to the convergence, I mean, how do we put ourselves as, more progressive in terms of values, or we just need to see in the future that they're converging? There's no difference between Islamic and non-Islamic institutions. Secondly, again, when it comes to the policy, you suggest that we need, of course, I also agree that we have to introduce gradually into a part of national policy. How to keep the track in the long term, because relaxing sometimes, will tends to make the activities losing the distinctive feature in the future. Meaning, well, let's start implementing only 10% or 20% of the core value. And then at the same time, who will have to be present at all times to keep the activities on track, meaning in terms of Sharia compliance, how to always remind us, because we cannot put in the regulation, but somebody that is advising needs to keep the navigation on track. Please pass me.
Okay, thank you. You see, the criticism towards, especially on the convergence part, I mean, that criticism is continue to be, raised on that's not much different, particularly in the context of Islamic finance. Islamic economics, not so much, because people do not see Islamic economics. See, when Islamic economics started earlier on, there was not much takers except from academics or researchers, but Islamic banking finance, I would say, mushroom, simply because you have banks, Islamic banks being established, and you can implement Islamic banking, Islamic finance in banking, takaful, capital market, and so on. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of research in that particular area. But when we look at the convergence, there's not much different that people see between banking and conventional banking and Islamic banking. To a certain extent, yes, to a certain extent. But I think if you can see now, the move is towards ensuring that Islamic banks, Islamic financial institutions follows Maqasid al-Sharia. So if we implement Maqasid al-Sharia, which I believe strongly, then you will see the differences. Of course, we are not going to compare 10% and 10%. Conventional bank charge 10%, Islamic bank charge 10% profit rate, for example. Of course, this will be the 10%. But if you look at the way Islamic banks are being implemented now, it's a question of incorporating the Maqasid in their decision making. As an example, as I said, a good example in Malaysia, we had discussion again with the central bank, is that when people do not pay, cannot pay, can we implement ihsan? Okay, can we implement ihsan to those people who are really not able to pay? Unlike conventional, you charge compounding of the interest if they are not able to pay. So now Islamic banks and regulators agree that we should implement ihsan. But then we talk about how do we then implement ihsan? What are the criteria and so on, to implement ihsan, which means that they do not have to pay if they are really, not capable to pay due to COVID-19. So this is where you're trying to implement Islamic banking, Islamic economic principle based on adil wal ihsan principle. But of course, we need to articulate that, we need to measure that. Okay, and this is not difficult, and it's now being worked out. And I'm also part of it to articulate, to measure how are people not able to pay, what category, how do you then decide them? Okay, and then based on that, they you forgo that they don't have to pay. They still have to pay profit, but that profit is not compounded. So they just pay. So there are ways that we show that yes, Islamic banking is based on Maqasid al-Sharia. It is being implemented based on the principles of Adil wal Ihsan. And this is very important for us to do that. But again, to implement that, you need to educate the regulators. So which means that the role of like Indonesia International Islamic University will have to train regulators to understand the principles of Maqasid al-Sharia, how you then implement it in the banking, takaful, capital market sector. Okay, so to me that's very important. Then on the issue of implementation and to ensure consistency, again, we plan, we implement, but Allah decides. So we cannot be guilty if it is not being fully implemented. So that's at least to pacify ourselves. But importantly, we need to have infrastructure. We need to have systems in order to ensure that there will be continuity, which also means that we need to have to incorporate the Islamic economics principles inside the regulations of the country, inside the central banks, inside the capital market authorities. All those principles should be either part of the regulation or the guidelines that financial institutions or companies will have to follow. So until and unless you put that as part of the infrastructure, it will not be consistently implemented, because as we know, humans have certain limitation. By the time a person dies, things would forget. But if you incorporate as part of the systems and infrastructure, it will continue to be implemented.
Okay. If I may read and combine a few questions from the participant, Pak Asmi. First, Pak Erli Rido Kismawadi, and then Pak Muhammad Haitan Rahman. We have a lot of questions now. Pak Afrad Arifin, Pak Muklis Hermat Rahmanto, and Pak Haryadi Harun. If I can combine those questions into 3 questions. First, when we talk about Islamic economic and finance, Pak Azmi, how we have to put the gravity between financial and economy, meaning are we going to always focus on the financial side, just expect the economic sides to follow suit, and then this is like COVID vaccine businesses, do we need to also have a forum in this area? And then from Pak Haitam, I think you have already mentioned earlier, but it is the question is about crowdfunding. What should be the values should be retained in this IT to make this different to other, crowdfunding institution? What should be the distinctive features where we want to establish a Sharia-based crowdfunding? Number 3, 4 and 5, I think it's quite similar. We'll talk about the exact calculation of the impact. Are there quite many research that shows the significance of zakat in terms of portion to the GDP? Okay, I think I will stop with 3 questions. Basmi, please.
Okay, let me go to the crowdfunding first, because we had discussion recently in the Sharia Committee of the Capital Market Authority on the crowdfunding platform. See, crowdfunding platform is just a platform where people raise money. Okay, if it is equity, then of course it will be based on equity, and if it is Sharia compliant, equity mudarabah musyarakah. But many of the companies that access to the crowdfunding platform are small companies. They are not able to pay the halal certificate, for example. In the context of Malaysia, to get halal certificate before you go to the crowdfunding is that your company must be halal certified. But the problem is that many small and medium enterprises companies, especially many micro and small medium enterprises, are not able to afford the halal certificate. So what we are doing in the context of Malaysia is that we are developing a template, okay, and that template will be utilized by the crowdfunding platform, okay. The template is to determine the Sharia compliance of companies. So essentially the template looks at the company in terms of operations, in terms of finance, and then based on that, we'll then decide whether the company is Sharia compliant or not before they can enter the crowdfunding platform to raise money. If they are then considered Sharia compliant, then they can raise their requirements in that crowdfunding platform based on whatever amount. And of course, the principles used to raise that money must be also Sharia compliant. So in this way, the approach is not to burden the micro companies for halal certification, but the crowdfunding platform company itself will determine the Sharia compliant. And hence, you are able to get more companies to come on board for crowdfunding purposes. So indirectly, also, you are making more and more companies to be Sharia compliant indirectly. Okay, so that's an example that we discussed, and then it's something that is going to be implemented in the near future. Okay, as regards to the question on, let me go to on the I'm not sure, COVID-19 halal business built from halal food. I'm not sure on the question.
The question is about how we should put the gravity, whether we need to concentrate on the financial sector or we need to also develop the intellectual discussion in the area of Islamic economic as a real sector.
Yeah. No, to me, we must do both. Finance is important. Why? Because finance would provide the necessary funding for businesses to operate. They will have to grow the economy. However, as I mentioned earlier on, we do not want to have too much financialization, where there is a big gap between the real sector and the financial sector. And that's very important. And the role, of course, is the role of the regulator to do that. We as an economist, for example, we say that we do not want to have too much financialization, but the one that has the authority to do that would be the regulator or the financial regulator. So it's important, as I mentioned earlier on, for a financial regulator to understand Islamic finance, Islamic economics, so that they, when they regulate, they implement, it is based on understanding of the Islamic economics principles. Then on the question of, next question is Afrad on the Center of Education in Islamic Finance. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Center and also the significance of the Islamic finance in terms of GDP portion. Okay.
Let me start by saying that I started on this research in Islamic economics and finance way back in 1983, many years ago. Okay, I'm still young though. Okay. I'm above 60, so in Malaysia considered as one of the senior citizens group. But what I'm saying is the Islamic finance education or Islamic economics and finance education to me now has shown a bit of maturity. Now it is spread over many countries. When we first started in Malaysia, it was only Malaysia and Pakistan at that time that offer Islamic economics as a discipline. Later on, it becomes Islamic finance. At universities, I'm talking about. Of course, there are individuals in different countries writing, talking about that. But as a university, there were only 2 universities at that time. But now, alhamdulillah, we have many institutions, including Indonesia, offering Turkey as an example. And I see 2 countries, to me, I'm very hopeful, you know, countries that are large in terms of population and that have the potential to make Islamic economics and finance even better. Of course, Indonesia, and second is Turkey. And because I see that there was a lot of interest in Islamic economics finance in Turkey, including, of course, Indonesia. So I see because of this interest, I think at the end of the day, the gravity will change. It will be moving towards Indonesia, will be moving towards Turkey. I'm not sure Nigeria is also another potential country. Okay, Nigeria within the African continent. So I do see that Islamic education, Islamic economic and finance education will get more interest. The key thing is to be consistent, and the word is always collaboration, 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 which means that in a country, there must be strong collaboration between university, industry, and the regulators if you want to make it successful. If you look at any successful venture, you need to have all this. Among the scientists in Malaysia, they call it Quadruple Helix. Quadruple Helix. Used in the science and technology space or area. Quadruple Helix means that collaboration between university, regulator, industry, and civil society. Okay, working together to support the development of an area. For example, if we talk about banking as an example, you have the bankers as industry, you have university, you have the regulator, and you have the civil society that collaborates together, identify issues, and works together in order to resolve those issues and push forward the industry further. So this is very important. So by doing that, you will be able to have significant impact on the GDP of the country, because now with the collaboration of different parties, the size of Islamic finance or Islamic social finance can increase, and it becomes a significant component of the GDP later on. So again, the key word is the collaboration of all entities. It is a must at the end of the day to really make it successful. And the final one is what can indicate to challenge Islam example? I do not understand this question. From Haryadi.
Okay, we can clarify later on. It is time around. If I may invite the panelists, I would like to welcome a wider discussion. The collaboration or the thought coming from Islamic studies when it comes to Islamic economic and finance. So I would like to invite a panel member to raise the question to Prof. Azmi, please.
Prof. Azmi?
Yes.
Question?
Yes, Dr. Jan.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation. I'm wondering what's your opinion regarding global imbalances between America and China at the moment, because both of big hero country very influence the economics in the world, because we know the world is interconnected, especially in finance, and we do know there are many issues regarding cryptocurrency, regarding IT, transformation digital, and then and so many imbalance in power. So we are in the middle of the big two, and what are your suggestion and what's the future of our economy related with this power?
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I answer that, let me just invite you to read a book called China's FinTech Explosion Disruption.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether you are familiar with that book.
Yeah, yes.
I
did, yes. Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, and then there's also a couple of books in terms of how China, developed economically. And the good thing is that China jumped and increased its financial inclusion without banking. Not through the route of banking, but through digital IT, digitalization strategy. To me, I see this parallel to Indonesia, parallel to countries like Egypt and some other countries in Africa, the UIII countries, where you have huge land space and population is spread out. So the only way to do that would be, or one of the ways to do that would be through digital means, rather than through the typical bank branches, ATMs, that sort of thing. So I do see that. And to me, as I mentioned, and you are also familiar with a couple of studies that say by 2030, Indonesia will be the top 5 countries in the world in terms of economic power.
Yes.
The top 5 or the top 10. And Turkey, of course, is also a very important country. The route to economic growth and development need not follow the same traditional approach, where you put intensive capital and so on. However, the power of digital can exponentially increase financial inclusion, wealth of individuals, and support the economic development of a country. And I see China as a model that we can emulate, although sometimes politically they tend to absorb countries under them. That's beside the point from the political side. But that's a model that we can apply and emulate in the context of bringing the country forward. You may not be able to copy it 100%, but there are things that it can be done. And particularly, I like the way they help to develop the digitalization, even in the context of central bank digital currency. They are the first one that implemented and experimented in a couple of cities in China. So that is really showing examples of people who are focused on developing their own economy and works towards resolving those challenges. Who would have thought China is able to send, not say even look at a shuttle to Mars. I mean, who would have thought that? But again, who would have thought Turkey is being able to produce drone? That is very powerful indeed. So the thing is, what is important in this particular case is to have the right leadership, the right institutions and infrastructure in the country, and the right policies. That will help the country to grow further. Without these ingredients, you may have good leadership, but without proper policy and infrastructure, it will not last long. So we need to have all those combinations. The economy need not be following the model of what we call it, bringing in major investments. I think the economic growth should be based on the strength, the competitive strength of a country. If you need to create more jobs, then do not just focus on high-tech industry, because high-tech industry may not allow you to create more jobs. So that would have to look at in the context of the strength of the country, and then develop economic policies within the realm of the strength of the country.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Asmi. One thing. So we need to rethink about our curriculum in economics, because the traditional variables is no longer proper to face the very difficult world like today.
Yeah, okay, good question. You see, I'm also a board member of the quality assurance body of the country. Under the Ministry of Education, we have what we call MQA, Malaysian Qualification Agency. That is the quality agency or quality assurance of higher education in Malaysia. I'm a board member of that. So I was appointed, I think, 2 years ago. And I've been very radical. And some of the academic programs that are put forward, I personally rejected at the board level, because to me, we need to change the education. We need to change curriculum. I give an example that recently that we discussed. In fact, only just yesterday, our board meeting. I now put it mandatory when you develop the curriculum for the country. Let's say, for example, economic studies program. Industry representative must be there from the beginning. It cannot be just academics sitting among themselves, then propose curriculum. To me, it is not enough, because they may think it is important, but it is not relevant to the country's requirement. The curriculum must be based on the needs of the country, not based on what the lecturers want.
Yes, agree with you.
Okay, lecturers come back, graduate from UK, he or she brings the UK style. Another person graduate from Europe, France, brings the France style. But what you need to do is that bring, again, my comment earlier on is the quadruple helix. Quadruple helix.
Quadruple.
Yeah, when you bring in the curriculum that you want, of course, you need to have academicians there, the lecturers, to prepare the curriculum initially. But from the beginning, you bring industry, you bring regulators, you bring civil society in that curriculum design. So that at the end of the day, your curriculum is based on the needs of the country, not based on what some lecturers think, especially the chairman or chairperson thinks.
Okay. Thank you very much for asking. Yes.
Now we make it mandatory.
Mandatory, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
mandatory
yes.
to have that.
We will try to build new curriculum in UIII, especially in Faculty of Economic and Business.
Because you see, but you need to have your quality assurance body. I know that you're at your ministry to put that requirement. Because I'm there, so we can impose now.
Yeah. We hope because we have new style of Ministry of Education, so we hope we can get a lot of support from him. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
When you wear many hats, you can do that.
Alhamdulillah, Prof. Asmi. For your age, you look very energetic. Alhamdulillah. For the spirit. Alhamdulillah. May I invite also another panelist, maybe colleagues from Islamic studies to question and how the relevance of Islamic studies and so on with the development of Islamic economic and finance. Maybe Pak Safik or Pak Jamhari. Pak Safik, if you have
Pak Lutfi, there I raise the hand. Pak Lutfi Hamidi.
Oh, Pak Lutfi. Okay, sorry, I didn't see. Pak Lutfi, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Dadan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Prof. Asmiuman, for very enlightening talk. I believe all of us learning much from you today. I have only two short questions. Firstly, as we might aware that Islamic economic actually constructed based on the Maqasid Sharia. And we know that Maqasid Sharia actually is in line with the green economy as well as inspire the sustainable development. My question is that in practical sense, we find that many Islamic banks, for example, they tend to prioritize profit on the cost of people and planet. So as you hold so many positions in board member of Islamic financial institution, what is your suggestion to balance between this gap? I mean, how in the future Islamic bank also can prioritize other two pillars, which is people and planet. Secondly, when you talk about the zakat, and it reminds me when you suggest the cover to cover the cost of social protection in Indonesia, we need at least 2.05% of GDP, while we find that the fund supplied by the zakat is only 1.75%. I think that we need to examine first, because the behavior of zakat in Indonesia, I think, is a little bit different perhaps with the Malaysian people. In case, although the fund is only 1.75%, but in fact, I found so many people, they donate and they pay zakat, but pay it directly. They want to distribute it to their neighbor, to their relatives. So perhaps this action of a good action could not be recorded in the official zakat institution. So I believe actually that the encouragement to pay zakat in Indonesia is quite high. Otherwise, I believe that there will be unrest in social unrest in Indonesia, because for the expectation during this COVID-19, the UKM or small business enterprise only can stand no less than 1 year, but we still saw that many of small medium enterprise, they still can survive in this difficult pandemic situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me just answer quickly. I think in terms of implementing Maqasid Syariah, particularly in the context of Islamic financial institutions, to implement Maqasid Syariah requires support from many members. And this is my experience. One is you need to have support from, not even, first is the board members, what you call commissioners, board of commissioners. So that's very important. Board of Commissioners must support Maqasid Syariah, which requires that you need to educate the Board of Commissioners in terms of the relationship of Maqasid Syariah in the context of Islamic economics and finance. So that's one. So we need to articulate and train them, make them be aware what is the role of Maqasid Syariah in the context of Islamic economics and finance. So that's one. Secondly, we also need to train our Sharia scholars. those who are sitting in the bank in terms of Maqasid al-Sharia. Many would not agree, some would not agree with Maqasid al-Sharia. They say that as long as it meets the Sharia principle halal and haram, so that's it. So, because Maqasid al-Sharia is, I would not say a new way of thinking. It is already there historically, except now we are using it as a powerful tool in order to bring about the real side of Islamic economics and finance. So we need to also educate the Sharia within the financial institution. We need to educate also the management of the financial institutions and as well as the regulators. For regulators, it's very important. Why? Because they must create a guideline for financial institutions to implement Maqasid al-Sharia. So there must be guideline, and there must be measurement, and there must be report. In the context of SDGs and green economy, we have a term called greenwashing. I'm not sure whether you know the greenwashing. People only show they are green, but they are not really implementing green. It's just only for publicity's sake. So we must develop reports, impact assessment, or what we call sustainability report, to ensure that Maqasid al-Sharia is being implemented. So those are important things. So while the Sharia scholars are talking about Maqasid al-Sharia, we need to get support from the management. We need to get support from the Board of Commissioners, and we need to get support from the regulators. This is how you make Maqasid al-Sharia implemented across all financial institutions, the Islamic financial institutions in Indonesia, or even in Malaysia and many other countries. You may not want to call Maqasid al-Sharia, you may want to call it Sustainable Agenda, SDGs. Name is fine, as long as all those principles are being incorporated. I always don't have problem in terms of names. People are not comfortable with Maqasid al-Sharia. Okay, fine. But the principles are there, the elements of Maqasid are there in the banking financial sector. Okay. As far as the zakat issue is concerned, yeah, I agree. People pay without government and so on. But if you want to use zakat as a programmatic, systematic tool to alleviate poverty, as a tool of the government, then you must have proper regulation. You must have proper collection, distribution, reporting. Okay. Then it can be an effective tool. If not, it will be just like this. People pay, but at the end of the day, it does not really address the issue of poverty alleviation, bringing to the next level. To do that, you must have a unified, programmatic, and systematic approach. So this is what I meant to make zakat as a powerful tool. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Asmi. I think the session today is very interesting and insightful with your present, Prof. Asmi.
Pak Dadan.
Yep. The session today.
Pak Dadan.
Yes, please.
Pak Dadan.
Yes. Pak Haidir.
Pak Dadan.
I can hear you, Pak Haidir, please. Oh, Pak Haidir, you want to say something? Pak Haidir? Okay. If not, unfortunately, after having a very excellent presentation and question and answer, we have to come to an end. Before I conclude the session, I have noted 3 points. First, the development of the Islamic economic and finance requires collaborations in terms of quadruple helix that include industry, regulators, university, and civil society that has to come together and then to make current approach that like a piece and puzzle approach to become systematic and comprehensive. Secondly, gradual implementation is a must, but it has to effectively answer to the challenges, and we have to let everybody on board, including small companies, to follow the rules and compliance standards of Islamic economics make them as a part of the activities. Number three, the development of Islamic economic and finance requires the utilization of current technological development, which we need to learn from China, meaning that China has used unconventional at that time to reach such development, and then even to move ahead of the global society. Number four, infrastructures needs to also to be set properly to get the competitive strength of a country, which is typical. In this sense, Prof. Asmi has already called us to become more friendly to our own market, to our own system. If somebody wants to get knowledge from one country, just do not, try to implement what is happening in that country and force it in our system. And it leads to number five, that curriculum needs to be revisited, needs to be discussed and developed, and then to meet properly and match to the industry, which is very important. And lastly, when we would like to implement, of course, we need to also call for all the layers in our system, starting from the regulators and also the structure of the firm, meaning we cannot just let the education systems go by itself, but we need to also try to educate at the every level in the company, including board of commissioners, and all decision makers in the company. I think those are, the point that we need to consider, try to think very deeply for us to determine the direction in the future. I think those are, again, thank you very much for asking me, and we look forward to having strategic collaboration with you and your institution. With this, I conclude the session. I would like to hand this over to Bu Imansari. Bu Imansari, please.
Thank you so much, Pak Dadang Mulyawan, PhD. Dear all panelists, before we end this webinar, let us take some photos. Our team will capture that moment. So I will count 1 and 2, and you guys must be ready. 1, 2. Okay, once again. 1, 2. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Pak Dadang, for having chaired this webinar session. Again, our gratitude should go to Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Azmi Omar for his wonderful and brilliant lecture. We also appreciate all panelists, participants for joining us. See you in the next webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Prof. Omar, thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Welcome. Sama-sama. Oke, terima kasih kembali. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oke, alhamdulillah. Ya, terima kasih Pak Rektor, Pak Bahrul, Pak Jamhari, Bapak-Bapak Ibu semua atas dukungannya untuk acara ini. Terima kasih, Pak.
Terima kasih Pak Dadang, terima kasih Prof. Komar.
Terima kasih Pak Dadang, Prof. Ian.
Terima kasih.
Pak Haidin.
Terima kasih Sari.
Semuanya. Terima kasih. Terima kasih semuanya.
Sirojudin.
Tadi Haidir ngomong tapi nggak ada suaranya.
Sebenarnya masuk, tapi Pak Haidir kayaknya nggak bisa dengar ini sendiri aja.
Iya, saya nggak tahu. Tadi kenapa
gini,
error.
Oh, sorry,